This HOA Karen called 911 as I demolished the vacation cabin they illegally built on my land. I came home from a 6-week hospital stay to find this brand new Airbnb sitting in my pasture. She actually shoved a forged paper in my face, saying I was trespassing on property my family has owned for generations, and then threatened to take my entire home. But she made one fatal mistake. She thought she was messing with some quiet old veteran. She had no idea. She'd just declared war on my kids. An FBI agent, an IRS investigator, and a U.S. postal inspector. She was so busy playing the victim, she never saw the trap being set. So when her cops finally showed up, who do you think ended up in handcuffs? Let me know where you're watching from, because you are not ready for this level of epic revenge. The drive home from the VA felt longer than the 6 weeks I was there. My new knee felt stiff, but my mind was focused on one thing: my own worn-in armchair, and the quiet that always settled over the woods behind my house at dusk. After my wife, Martha, passed, that quiet became my closest friend. I turned onto my long gravel driveway, the one I'd graded myself every spring for 30 years, and felt that familiar sense of peace wash over me. I was home. Then I saw it. I stopped my truck so fast, the engine nearly stalled. Sitting right in the middle of my side pasture, where the deer used to graze, was a brand new A-frame cabin. It was one of those fancy, modern-looking things with big windows and a dark gray roof. For a second, I thought I was confused, maybe a side effect of the pain medication. But no, it was real, solid, a whole building that simply wasn't there when I left. My land, 2 acres of it, was clearly marked. The old fence line Martha and I put up was still there, a little saggy but clear as day. This cabin was a good 50 yards inside my property line. I got out of my truck, my knee groaning in protest, and walked toward it. The smell of fresh-cut pine and new paint was sharp in the air. The foundation was set on concrete piers. There was even a little gravel path leading to the front door, a door that was locked tight. It was a vacation cabin, built to look like it had always been there, and its presence felt like a slap in the face. Before I could even process what to do next, a voice cut through the air. "Well, hello, Tom. We were wondering when you'd be back." It was Sharon Biggs, the president of our homeowners association. She was marching across my lawn with a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She had this smile that never reached her eyes. She stopped a few feet away, making a show of looking from me to the cabin. Isn't it lovely? A real asset to the community. I just stared at her. "Sharon, what is this thing? And what is it doing on my land?" She let out a little condescending laugh. "Oh, Tom, it's not your land. Not this part. This is the new community relaxation cabin. It's on the HOA common area easement." My mind went blank. Easement? I'd owned this property free and clear since 1988. There was no HOA common area on my deed. "There is no easement on my property," I said, my voice low and flat. I'd spent 40 years as a lineman for the power company. I understood property lines, blueprints, and legal documents better than most lawyers. Sharon's smile tightened. "I have the paperwork right here," she chirped, flipping through a few pages on her clipboard. "You signed off on it years ago. A special land use agreement for neighborhood improvement. See?" She thrust a sheet of paper at me. It was a poorly photocopied document titled Community Land Grant. At the bottom was a signature line. And on that line was a messy, hurried scribble that was supposed to be my name. It looked nothing like my careful, old-fashioned cursive. "I never signed this," I said, handing it back to her. "This is a fake." Sharon snatched the paper back, her friendly mask crumbling. "Now, Tom, there's no need to get confused. We have the approved plat map on file. This cabin is here to stay. It's for the good of the neighborhood." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back toward her own house, leaving me standing there next to a building that shouldn't exist. I felt a hot rage building in my chest, but I pushed it down. Anger wasn't a tool. It was a distraction. I went inside my quiet, empty house and straight to the filing cabinet in my office. I pulled out the thick manila folder labeled Deed Survey. It took me a few minutes to unroll the original surveyor's plat map from when Martha and I bought the lot. I spread it out on the dining room table. Every inch was there, precisely measured and marked. My 2 acres, bordered by thick, clear lines. There was no easement, no common area, no community land grant. The only thing mentioned was the 20-foot utility easement along the main road, the one I knew like the back of my hand. Sharon Biggs was a liar and a forger. That Saturday, my kids came to visit. My daughter Rachel arrived first. She's a postal inspector, tough as nails and doesn't miss a thing. She took one look at the cabin and said, "What in the world is that?" I explained what happened. When I showed her the copy of the document Sharon had given me, her eyes narrowed. She pulled her phone out and took a high-resolution picture of the signature. "Dad, the ink pressure is all wrong. It's a single, fast stroke. Your signature has hesitations, like you're carefully writing. This is a trace job, and a bad one." Next, my son David pulled in. He's with the IRS Criminal Investigations Division. He's the quiet one, the numbers guy. He walked around the cabin, noting the brand names on the windows and the professional-grade locks. "This wasn't cheap," he said, joining us at the table. "An A-frame kit like this, plus labor and foundation, you're looking at $50,000–$60,000 minimum. An HOA doesn't just find that kind of money. Where did it come from? And more importantly, who's getting the profit?" My youngest, Chris, got there last. He's with the FBI, in the cybercrime unit. He listened to the whole story without saying a word, his gaze fixed on the cabin through the window. When I was done, he just shook his head slowly. "They didn't just build a cabin, Dad. They filed a fraudulent document. They're claiming ownership. This isn't an HOA squabble over lawn ornaments." He looked from me to his brother and sister. A new kind of quiet fell over the room. A heavy, focused silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I was used to. It was the calm before a storm. "She thinks she's in a fight with a retired lineman," Chris said, his voice hard as steel. "She has no idea she just picked a fight with the federal government. This isn't just shady, it's a criminal enterprise." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple dispute. This was going to be a war, fought not with angry words, but with receipts, evidence, and the full weight of the law. My kids left that Sunday with a clear, unspoken agreement. We weren't going to react. We were going to collect. In my line of work, you never touched a live wire without knowing exactly where the current was coming from and where it was going. This was no different. Sharon Biggs was a live wire, and I needed a map of her whole crooked circuit before I made a move. It didn't take long for her to send the first jolt. On Tuesday morning, I found a crisp white envelope taped to my front door. It had the official HOA letterhead, which looked like something she'd designed herself on a home computer. Inside was a formal notice. It said I was being fined $200 a day for interference with HOA construction. Interference. I hadn't set foot near that cabin since the day I found it. The notice cited a rule in the HOA bylaws that didn't exist, and it was backdated to the day I got home from the hospital. The current balance, it claimed, was already $800. I scanned the document and emailed a copy to my kids. No comment, just the file. The family text chain lit up a minute later. "Keep it. Date and time stamp your email. This is mail fraud if she sent it, wire fraud if she delivered it by hand, and is using email to coordinate. David, the backdating is intent to defraud. She's creating a paper trail to make it look legitimate. Chris, check for fingerprints. Just kidding. Mostly." A week later, the second envelope appeared. This one was even more official looking, sent by certified mail, so I had to sign for it at the post office. It was a notice of intent to file lien. The total amount had jumped to a staggering $9,400. It was a mix of the daily fines, plus new administrative fees, legal consultation fees, and a property compliance violation penalty. The letter stated that if the amount wasn't paid in full within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property and begin foreclosure proceedings. They were threatening to take my home. My home! The one Martha and I had saved for, the one where we raised our kids. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just a power trip anymore. This was a land grab, pure and simple. I called the kids for a conference call that night. She's not just trying to keep the cabin, I told them. She's trying to force me out. Rachel spoke first. Her voice, all business. Okay, the notice mentions a special vote by the board to approve the cabin project. Did you ever receive notice of this vote? Never, I said. And I'm supposed to be notified of any board meeting. Exactly, she replied. She sent the lien notice via email to the HOA mailing list, a little update for the neighbors. She BCC'd everyone. David, you got the full email I forwarded? Got it, David said. I looked at the source headers. The official HOA Gmail account, the one this was sent from, was created on May 12. The special vote, she references in the email, supposedly happened on April 28. There was a pause. Chris broke the silence. So, she held a vote using an email address that didn't exist yet. She's not just a forger. She's a bad one. The very next afternoon, I was in my workshop, cleaning my tools, when I saw the flashing lights through the window. A local sheriff's department cruiser was parked in my driveway. Sharon Biggs was standing next to it, clipboard in hand, pointing at my front door. The deputy, a middle-aged guy with a tired look, walked up my steps and knocked. I met him at the door. Before he could even speak, Sharon piped up from the lawn. Officer, this is the man I told you about. He's been threatening to damage HOA property. I looked at the deputy. This is my property, I said calmly, and I haven't threatened anyone. Before stepping out, I reached into my pocket and discreetly tapped my phone to start a video recording, then casually switched to my front door camera app and made sure the microphone was active. The deputy glanced from me to Sharon. Ma'am, he's on his own porch. Sharon marched right up to the bottom step. Not for long, she said, her voice dripping with venom. She looked right at me. This is HOA common land now, sir. We have the papers to prove it. You are the one who is trespassing. She was putting on a show for the deputy. I didn't take the bait. I just stood there, silent. My silence seemed to make her even angrier. She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hiss, not realizing my doorbell camera was picking up every word. I'm telling you for your own good, Tom. Stop fighting this. We have the board, we have the community on our side. You're just one old man. We're gonna build you right out of this neighborhood. The deputy shifted his feet, looking uncomfortable. He finally turned to me. Sir, just try to keep the peace. Don't go near the cabin. He tipped his hat and walked back to his car. He hadn't asked for my side of the story. He hadn't asked to see my deed. He just took her word for it. As they drove away, Sharon gave me a triumphant smirk from the passenger seat. That night, David sent another text. Found something. Attached was a link to an Airbnb listing. The title read, Peaceful Luxury A-Frame Cabin in the Woods. The pictures showed the inside of the cabin on my land, beautifully decorated with brand new furniture. It was listed for $440 a night. My blood ran cold. The violation felt deeper now. It wasn't just a building. They were selling access to my life, my quiet, my privacy. They were turning my home into a hotel. This was never for the community. I said out loud to the empty house. It was always about the money. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark room. The anger was still there, but now it was forged into something else, something hard and sharp. Resolve. We had the forged document. We had proof of a fake vote from a non-existent email address. We had her on camera, admitting her plan to build me out. And now we had the motive. A profitable, illegal rental business. That night, my kids and I made a decision. We weren't going to hire a lawyer to send angry letters. We weren't going to file a civil suit that would take years to resolve. We were going to handle this ourselves. In-house. This wasn't a job for the courts. This was a job for federal agents. And the first order of business was simple. We needed to dig. The time for being angry was over. This was now a job. My kids called it Operation Pasture, a little bit of gallows humor that made me smile. We operated like a well-oiled machine, each of us with a specific role. They were the intelligence unit, working from their offices hundreds of miles away, and I was the man on the ground. We moved quietly, carefully, and with a single purpose: to gather a mountain of evidence so high and so solid that Sharon Biggs and her little HOA empire would be buried under it. My daughter, Rachel, struck first. She focused on that special vote mentioned in the lien notice. She said that in mail fraud cases, the fakery is always in the little details. The HOA's official business was conducted through a simple Gmail address. Using some of her brother Chris's technical know-how, they found a backdoor. The recovery phone number listed on the account belonged to Sharon's vice president, Dean Holloway, and the security questions were laughably easy. Things like, "What was the name of your first pet?" Chris found the answer in a public post on Sharon's Facebook page from 5 years ago. Within an hour, they had access. What they found was a digital smoking gun. There was a private Google sheet titled HOA Board Actions 2024. It was a complete fabrication. It listed dates for meetings that never happened, minutes from discussions that nobody had, and votes that were never cast. On the line for April 28, it showed the special vote to approve the cabin project. It listed 5 board members as present and voted yes. I knew 2 of those people personally. One was an elderly woman who had been in a nursing home since January, and the other was a pilot who was on a month-long international route during that time. It was a clumsy, arrogant lie, all neatly logged in a spreadsheet for us to find. Meanwhile, David was following the money. As an IRS agent, that's what he does best. He started with the Airbnb listing. The host was listed not as Sharon or the HOA, but as a limited liability company, or LLC, called Whispering Pines Getaways. It was a classic move to hide ownership. But David knew that every LLC has to be registered with the state and must have a registered agent, a person responsible for legal notices. He pulled the public records from the Secretary of State's website. The registered agent for Whispering Pines Getaways was a man named Martin Biggs. A quick search of property and family records confirmed it. Martin was Sharon Biggs's first cousin, a small-time contractor from 2 counties over. The money from every single booking was flowing into a shell company controlled by her family. She hadn't just built a cabin on my land. She'd set up a secret family business and was using the HOA as a front to protect it and give it the appearance of being legal. It was racketeering, plain and simple, and David had the paperwork to prove it. The final piece of the puzzle, and the most chilling, came from Chris. He decided to look into the corrected plat map that Sharon had waved at me. He accessed the county's digital land records portal, and there it was, filed just 2 months earlier while I was away. A document titled Plat Map Correction, Miller Property. It showed a new line carving out a 1/4-acre HOA common area right where the cabin stood. And at the bottom of the form was the signature section. It required the signature of the property owner or their authorized agent. My signature wasn't there. Instead, a man named Dean Holloway, the HOA vice president, had signed it with a box checked next to his name that read, Co-owner, authorized agent for Tom Miller. It was a felony, clear as day. He had impersonated me to the county government to illegally alter my property deed. This was the document they were using as the legal basis for everything. It was the foundation of their entire scam, and it was pure fraud. While the kids were digging through the digital dirt, I started my work on the ground. First, I called my old friend Jerry, a retired surveyor with 40 years of experience. I told him the situation, and he was at my house the next morning with his transit and stakes. An HOA can't just vote a new property line into existence, Tom, he said, shaking his head. That's not how land works. For the next 3 hours, we worked in full view of the neighborhood. Jerry used my original plat map and the county's official GPS benchmarks to mark the true property line. We hammered wooden stakes with bright orange flags into the ground every 10 feet. The line ran right across the new gravel path, just a few inches from the cabin's front porch. The message was unmistakable. When we were done, Jerry created a new, certified survey map, signed and sealed, and I recorded it on video, explaining every stake. Next, I went to the hardware store. I bought 2 high-powered, motion-activated floodlights and aimed them directly at the cabin. I also installed 3 more security cameras, creating a triangle of coverage that captured the cabin, its path, and a wide swath of my property. Everything was recorded and uploaded to a secure cloud server that Chris had set up. From now on, every move they made would be documented. That evening, I was on my porch, enjoying the cool air. I was looking up at one of the new floodlights I'd installed, checking the angle. As I did, my eyes caught something odd. Tucked up under the wooden eave of the porch roof, right above the porch light, was a small black box. It was no bigger than a pack of matches, held in place by a single nail, and there was a tiny hole in one side. I knew what it was instantly. It was a listening device, a bug. They hadn't just stolen my land and my peace. They were spying on me, on my own porch. The game had just changed. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about my home, my safety. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was time to stop digging and start demolishing. Finding that bug under my porch light was the final switch. It meant they weren't just greedy, they were malicious. All thoughts of a quiet resolution evaporated. This had to end, and it had to end now. I spent the next 2 days assembling my final toolkit. This wasn't about anger or revenge anymore. It was about precision. First, I went down to the county records office in person. I recorded my conversation with the county clerk, a friendly woman named Brenda, as she confirmed that the plat map correction, filed by Dean Holloway, was highly irregular and processed without the required second form of identification. She provided a certified copy of the fraudulent document and my original, untampered deed. That was evidence A. Next, I sat down and made a simple slideshow. I put the official county GIS map of my property side by side with the altered map from the HOA's forged document. The difference was stark and undeniable. That was evidence B. Using the footage from my old security camera, which I kept even after installing the new ones, I compiled a time-lapse video. It showed the delivery trucks dropping off building supplies for the cabin months before the supposed special vote ever took place, proving premeditation. That was evidence C. The final piece was a large, professionally printed sign. I had it made at the print shop downtown. In big, bold, 3-inch letters, it read, "Private property. Illegal structure scheduled for immediate removal per County Code 113.8. Unauthorized construction." I even looked up the specific code for good measure. There was no room for argument. On Friday night, I had one last video call with the kids. We went over the plan one more time. Chris had already looped in his contacts at the local field office, giving them a full briefing. David had prepared a financial summary that traced the Airbnb money from the Shell LLC directly to accounts controlled by Sharon's cousin. Rachel had compiled a complete timeline of the fraud, from the first forged signature to the illegal bug she was certain was a violation of the Wiretap Act. Every piece of the puzzle was in place. My job was simple. I was the fuse. Saturday morning, I was up before the Sunday. The air was cool and damp. At exactly 6:45 a.m., I walked to my barn and pulled the key from the hook. The old case backhoe sputtered for a moment, before roaring to life, its diesel engine a familiar, comforting growl. It was a sturdy machine, one I'd used for years to dig trenches, move rocks, and clear fallen trees. Today, it had a new purpose. I drove it slowly across the pasture, the big tires leaving deep tracks in the dewy grass. I parked it directly in front of the A-frame cabin and planted my new sign firmly in the ground, facing the road. Then, I got to work. I wasn't just going to knock the thing down, that would be messy and reckless. This was a disassembly, not a demolition. I started with the support bolts on the front porch. The cabin was built on raised piers, and the porch was a separate structure. I used a large wrench from my toolbox, the metal groaning as I loosened the heavy-duty bolts connecting the porch to the main cabin frame. It took about 20 minutes. I was just finishing the last bolt when the screaming started. "What are you doing? Stop! Stop right now!" Sharon Biggs was power walking across my lawn, her phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing pink pajamas and a silk robe, a look of pure, unadulterated fury on her face. "I'm calling 911. He's destroying HOA property. He's lost his mind." Her voice was shrill, exactly as my cameras recorded it. I ignored her completely. I climbed back into the cab of the backhoe, started the engine, and gently, carefully, nudged the front of the porch with the bucket. With the bolts removed, there was nothing holding it. It teetered for a second and then collapsed forward with a loud crack of splintering wood, landing flat on the ground. It was clean, it was precise. Sharon let out a gasp that was half shriek, half sob. Her silver Lexus was parked at the edge of my driveway, and she watched from behind its safety, her mouth hanging open. A few minutes later, the flashing lights arrived. Not one cruiser this time, but two. The same deputy from before, Ray Menser, got out of the first car, his hand already on his weapon. "Sir, step down from the machine, now." I calmly switched off the engine, took the key, and climbed down. As Deputy Menser approached, a black sedan pulled in behind his cruisers. A man in a crisp suit stepped out. It was my son, Chris. He walked calmly toward us. "Hold on, officer," Chris said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. He flipped open his wallet, showing his badge and credentials. "FBI, this is now a federal matter." Deputy Menser froze. He stared at the badge, then at Chris, then at me. His entire tough guy demeanor dissolved. Federal?" he stammered. Chris nodded. "The structure you see here was built as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise involving wire fraud, mail fraud, and forgery of federal and county documents." He gestured toward Sharon, who was still standing by her Lexus, looking pale. "And that woman just committed a felony by making a false 911 report in furtherance of that criminal enterprise." As Chris spoke, a second agent got out of the sedan and walked directly toward Sharon. It was a woman, no nonsense, and she didn't waste any time. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm, "turn around, please. Place your hands behind your back." That moment was perfectly silent. It was as if the whole world held its breath. The chirping of the morning birds, the distant hum of traffic, it all faded away. The only sound was the metallic click of handcuffs closing around Sharon Biggs's wrists. She didn't scream or fight. She just stood there, her face a mask of disbelief, the silk of her robe looking flimsy and absurd in the harsh morning light. Her little empire of clipboards and forged papers had crumbled in a single clean moment. By now, neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the sirens. They stood on their lawns, coffee mugs in hand, phones held up to record. The woman who had lorded over them with petty rules and threats was now the star of a show she couldn't control. The second FBI agent read Sharon her rights, in a calm, clear voice that carried across the morning air. Deputy Menser and his partner just stood by their cruisers, looking lost and completely out of their depth. They were local officers caught in the middle of a federal takedown, and they knew better than to interfere. Chris walked over to me. He gave me a quick, reassuring nod. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded back. "I'm fine. Just getting some work done." A small smile touched his lips. He turned to the stunned deputies. "This property is a crime scene," he stated. "Not asked. We've got it from here. We'd appreciate it if you could secure the perimeter and keep onlookers back." Menser, eager to have a purpose, snapped into action, directing his partner to start putting up police tape along my driveway. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. My son had already briefed the U.S. Attorney's Office days earlier. They had seen the evidence package. My kids had assembled the forged documents, the fraudulent plat map, the illegal wiretap, the financial trail leading to the shell company. The case was airtight. The arrest warrant for Sharon had been issued the day before. Her panicked 911 call was just the icing on the cake, adding an extra charge for making a false report to law enforcement. As they led a silent, stone-faced Sharon to the FBI sedan, Chris walked over to her HOA vice president, Dean Holloway, who had come running out of his house and was now standing frozen on his lawn. Chris spoke to him in a low voice, but I could hear every word. "Mr. Holloway, you signed a fraudulent document at the county records office, impersonating a property co-owner. That's a felony. We also know you were complicit in the wiretapping and the Airbnb scheme. You have two options. You can be arrested right now and charged as a co-conspirator, or you can cooperate fully with our investigation, starting immediately." Dean's face went white. He was a follower, not a leader, and without Sharon to hide behind, he crumbled instantly. He started nodding his head vigorously, stammering, "I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. It was all her idea." He was singing before they even asked him for the tune. Within an hour, it was all over. The FBI cars were gone, taking Sharon and a very talkative Dean Holloway with them. The local deputies packed up their tape and left, eager to be anywhere else. The neighbors slowly retreated back into their houses, whispering and staring. I was left alone in my pasture, standing next to my backhoe and the collapsed porch of a cabin that should never have been built. The fallout was swift and total. By sundown, every single member of the HOA board had resigned via a mass email. They claimed they had been misled by Sharon's leadership. My phone started ringing with calls from neighbors, offering awkward apologies. The $9,400 lien that had been placed on my house was expunged from the county records by Monday morning. The fraudulent fines disappeared into thin air. The Airbnb listing was flagged and taken down. The Whispering Pines Getaways LLC, now officially under federal investigation for fraud. I never saw Sharon Biggs again. Her house went up for sale a month later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she took a plea deal, avoiding a long prison sentence but receiving years of probation, a hefty fine, and an order to pay full restitution for the cost of the cabin's construction and its subsequent removal. All the money she had made from the illegal rentals was seized. She couldn't vote against gravity. The weight of her lies had finally crushed her. I stood there, looking at the half-dismantled cabin. It was an ugly scar on my land, but it was a temporary one. I hadn't needed to scream or threaten. I just needed to be right. I let the evidence speak for me. As I climbed back onto my case to finish the job, a phrase popped into my head. "This land's not yours just because you're louder," I said to myself. And for the first time in months, the quiet that settled around me felt like my own again. It felt like peace. It took me the better part of a week to finish dismantling the cabin. I worked methodically, just like any other job. I unbolted the walls, lowered the roof trusses, and stacked the lumber neatly by the barn. A local salvage company paid me a fair price for the materials, and I used the money to hire a crew to tear out the concrete piers and reseed the pasture. As I worked, life in the neighborhood started to find a new, quieter normal. The boundary lines that Sharon had tried to blur were now sharper than ever, both on the map and in people's minds. The story, of course, got out. The local paper ran a front-page article with the headline, HOA President Charged in Elaborate Land Theft Scheme. It mentioned the fraudulent documents and the illegal Airbnb, but it tactfully left my name and my children's professions out of it, simply referring to me as a local veteran. The most significant change happened at the county level. The story of Dean Holloway impersonating me to file a fake plat map sent a shockwave through the records office. They immediately revised their protocols. From now on, any amendment to a property map required the owner to be present with a government-issued photo ID. It also required a mandatory third-party review by a county surveyor. My little fight had closed a loophole that could have hurt a lot of other people. My doorbell camera footage and the evidence my kids compiled became something of a local legend. Chris told me that the U.S. Attorney's Office was using our case as a training example for a webinar series on HOA accountability for law enforcement agencies across the state. They called it a perfect document, escalate, and enforce case study. It was strange to think of our family's ordeal as a PowerPoint presentation, but if it helped someone else, then it was worth it. The community itself began to heal. The fear that Sharon had cultivated for years slowly started to fade. One afternoon, my neighbor from across the street, a quiet man named George, came over while I was rebuilding a section of my old fence line. He just stood there for a minute, watching me work. "I need to apologize, Tom," he said finally, his voice heavy. "Sharon held a Zoom meeting a few months back. Most of us weren't there. The next day, she sent an email saying the board had voted to purchase that strip of land from you for the cabin. She told us you got a good price for it, and that you were happy to help the community." I stopped hammering and looked at him. "She told you I sold it to her?" He nodded, looking ashamed. "Yeah. She made it sound like you were a hero. We had no idea. We just went along with it. It's no excuse. But I'm sorry. I believed him." Sharon hadn't just built her lies on forgeries. She'd built them on the trust of her neighbors. I just nodded and told him, "Water under the bridge, George." That was all that needed to be said. He wasn't the only one. Another neighbor, a woman a few houses down, admitted that Sharon had threatened her with fines for having the wrong shade of mailbox. People started talking to each other again, not as potential rule breakers, but as neighbors. A month later, my kids came home for a weekend. We didn't talk much about what happened. We didn't have to. Instead, we did something better. I fired up the old barbecue grill, and we had a cookout right in the middle of the pasture where the cabin used to stand. The new grass was just starting to sprout. Rachel brought her famous potato salad. David grilled the burgers, and Chris brought a cooler full of drinks. We sat there in lawn chairs as the sun went down, listening to the crickets start their nightly chorus. It felt good. It felt right. As I looked out over the freshly seeded earth, I noticed the big gnarled pine tree that used to stand right behind where the cabin's porch had been. I'd always thought it was an ugly, misshapen thing that blocked the view of the sunset. Sharon's builders had cut it down to make room for their illegal cabin. I looked at the now unobstructed view of the orange and purple sky. "Funny thing," I said, mostly to myself, "I always hated that pine tree. It's the one thing she got right." My kids all laughed, a real genuine laugh that echoed in the quiet evening. It was the sound of a chapter closing. The scar on my land was healing, and so were we. The lines were clean now. The property was mine, the quiet was restored, and my family, the most important thing in the world, was right here with me, safe and sound. The dust settled, both literally in my pasture and figuratively in the neighborhood. Justice, I learned, doesn't arrive with a thunderclap. It's not loud and angry like Sharon was. It's quiet. It's the rustle of a certified document being stamped at the county clerk's office. It's the steady, undeniable timestamp on a digital video file. It's accurate. And in a world that feels increasingly chaotic and dishonest, I found a deep sense of peace in that simple fact. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about what had happened. I thought about my friends down at the VFW hall, About the folks I see at the senior center, many of whom are widows and widowers living alone on a fixed income. They are good, honest people who trust that the system works, and they are the perfect targets for bullies like Sharon Biggs, who use confusing paperwork and big legal words as weapons. I realized that my family's unique set of skills was a shield that most people don't have. But the tools we used? They were simpler than I thought. The core of our whole defense wasn't my kids' federal badges. It was a handful of ordinary papers. That's when I got an idea. I sat down at my old kitchen table with a notepad and a pen and started writing. I wasn't writing a story. I was drawing a map. A map for anyone who felt lost and powerless against a person or a group trying to take what was rightfully theirs. I called it How to Beat HOA Fraud, with 5 documents and a flip phone. I wanted the title to be clear. You didn't need to be a tech wizard or a legal expert. You just needed to be organized. I broke it down into 5 simple steps. First, your deed and plat map. This is your foundation. I wrote about how to get a certified copy from your county records office and to keep it safe. Second, the HOA's own governing documents. Read them, highlight them, and understand the rules they are supposed to be following. Third, a written timeline. Every phone call, every letter, every visit. Write it down with the date, time, and what was said. A detailed log is a bully's worst enemy. Fourth, keep every piece of paper, every threatening letter, every fine notice, every email. Never throw anything away. These are their lies, signed and dated. And fifth, record everything you can. I explained that a simple doorbell camera, or the voice recorder on a basic flip phone, is powerful enough to capture a threat or a confession. I made 100 copies at the local print shop. It was just a few pages stapled together with no fancy graphics. I took the first stack down to the VFW post and left them on the information table, right next to the flyers for pancake breakfasts. I dropped another stack at the senior center. The last pile I took to the hardware store and tacked a copy up on the community bulletin board. I didn't put my name on it. It wasn't about me. A few days later, a fellow veteran stopped me in the grocery store. He just nodded at me, a silent look of understanding and gratitude in his eyes. That was enough. The narrative I kept repeating to myself, the one I wrote in the closing paragraph of my little guide, was the most important lesson I'd learned. You don't need to be mean, just be right. You don't need revenge, just receipts. Meanness is weakness. It's what people like Sharon resort to when they don't have facts on their side. Revenge is a fire that burns you just as much as your enemy. But receipts, a stamped document, a clear recording, a dated photograph, they are cold, hard, and undeniable. They don't have an opinion. They just state the truth. In the wake of Sharon's arrest, the neighborhood had to rebuild its own leadership. A special election was held. A man named Bill Jenkins was voted in as the new HOA president. Bill is a retired electrician in his late 60s. He's a man who spent his life working with codes, regulations, and wiring diagrams. He believes in rules that make sense, and that things should be done correctly and safely. He was the perfect person for the job. The first thing Bill did was make everything transparent. HOA meetings are now held once a month at the community clubhouse, and for those who can't attend, they are live streamed on a private YouTube channel. The minutes and financial statements are posted online for every homeowner to see. The era of secret votes and backroom deals was over. A few weeks ago, a new sign was installed at the entrance to our neighborhood. The old, ornate sign that listed a dozen complicated rules was taken down. The new sign is simple, made of dark wood with clean, white lettering. It has only 2 lines. The first line reads, "Welcome home." The second, "Property lines matter." Every time I drive past it, I feel a quiet sense of victory. It's a reminder that order was restored not by shouting, but by evidence, and that the strongest fences are not made of wood or wire, but of the simple, unbendable truth.